The most striking truth about strategic innocence is that the most dangerous weapon in a controller's arsenal isn't their capacity for cruelty, but their ability to appear entirely incapable of it. You know, we generally assume that power is maintained through dominance and aggression, but in these high-pressure dynamics, your own biological drive to protect the fragile and confused is used to turn you into a bully, for even suggesting a boundary. Have you ever wondered why trying to hold a gentle person accountable for their actions always seems to end with you feeling like you're the one who needs to apologize? Well, that is the core paradox of the Innocence Cloak. It's the moment your own capacity for empathy and your fear of being the villain are turned into the mechanism of your own emotional silencing.
So yeah, this is the whole paradox, isn't it? As it says right here, your empathy and your fear of being the bad guy become the very tools used to silence you. Now, it's really important to say this right up front. What we're talking about today are observable patterns of interaction. This isn't a diagnosis of anyone's character or their secret intentions, not at all. Think of this more as an exploration of how weaponized vulnerability, that strategic performance of helplessness, can be totally misinterpreted by our brains as genuine distress, which then effectively shuts down our ability to think clearly.
All right, so let's dive into this first concept, the Innocence Cloak. And to be really clear, we're not just looking at a character flaw, like someone who's just overly sensitive. We are analyzing an observable system, an actual architecture that's designed for a very specific purpose, creating total immunity from accountability. So think of it less as a personality and more as a strategy.
And that's the crucial point right there. The innocence we're talking about, it isn't real naivete. It's a social fortress. It's a construct. And at its core, this whole dynamic rewrites social power by creating two mandatory roles. When one person consistently takes up the space of the perpetual child, always confused, always fragile, always needing to be rescued, they pretty much force the other person into the role of the aggressor, just for asking for basic adult accountability. Over time, if you're the target of this, you don't just lose the argument, you start to lose your very right to be heard. You start questioning if your own perceptions are even real. Okay, so what are the building blocks of this fortress? What are the tools that are used to build this cage for your voice? Well, it all starts by taking one of our most powerful human instincts and turning it against us, our own empathy. And this is where we can really see how our own best qualities can be used to trap us. So, the foundation of this entire system is something called Plausible Deniability Engineering. Now, this isn't just someone being clumsy or forgetful. No, it's the active and often subconscious process of creating this protective layer of, oh, I didn't know, or I forgot, or I'm just so bad at this, all to systematically shift responsibility away. It's so incredibly effective because it frames any boundary violation as just an accident, making any attempt to address it seem like a huge overreaction. It makes you look cruel for getting upset over a simple mistake. And that leads us right to the first major tool, the empathy trap. This is a belief pattern that literally hijacks our natural biological drive to protect the vulnerable. The trap is this assumption that because someone looks distressed, they're crying, they seem scared, their voice is trembling, that they couldn't possibly be the one causing harm. Our brain completely misinterprets this weaponized vulnerability as genuine distress, and our protective instincts kick in. But they're aimed at the wrong person. We end up protecting the source of the harm from the consequences of their own actions.
And the final destination of the empathy trap is a state of moral paralysis. This is that gut-wrenching physical feeling, that sense of being totally incapable of pushing for clarity. You know something's wrong, but every fiber of your being is just screaming that holding them accountable would be cruel or mean to this seemingly innocent person. This is where your brain starts to gaslight itself. To avoid that intense social shame of being seen as the bad guy, you actually start to question your own reality, your own conscience. Your deep desire to be a good person is turned into a leash.
This slide here really shows the ultimate goal of the whole system, to move you from that first column over to the second. You start out in a world of active dialogue, where both people, take responsibility for how they affect each other. But the architecture of strategic innocence is designed to systematically push you into passive submission. That's the state where you actually find yourself apologizing for the way you were harmed just to make the other person's tears stop. It's a complete 180-degree inversion of responsibility.
So how does this inversion actually happen? It's not random. There is a systematic, repeatable pattern that's at play here. It's like a script that just runs over and over again. So let's look at the blueprint of this mechanism. It's a process that some researchers refer to with the acronym DARVO, which stands for Deny, Attack, and Reverse Victim and Offender. This cycle usually happens in three pretty distinct steps. First up, you have the accidental incursion. A boundary gets violated. This is the denial phase. It wasn't a violation, it was just a mistake. Second, you get the pained defensive. When you try to address what happened, the conversation instantly pivots. Instead of talking about the facts, the controller becomes absolutely devastated that you would attack them. This is the attack, where you are framed as cruel for even bringing it up. And then finally, the most important step, the cognitive inversion. This is where they reverse the victim and offender. Your brain, which is wired to de-escalate conflict, urges you to soothe the crying person who just hurt you. You apologize, and that apology is then used as proof that you were the one who was wrong all along.
This quote here really captures the emotional engine of the whole cycle. Their tears trigger your guilt, which in turn triggers your silence, and when this loop repeats over and over, it leads to something you could call boundary atrophy. It's like a muscle you stop using. Your ability to even recognize, let alone defend your own boundaries, just gets weaker and weaker. Your brain becomes so deeply conditioned to believe that accountability equals cruelty and submission equals kindness that you start to preemptively silence yourself just to avoid the cycle altogether.
So we've looked at the how, we've seen the architecture and the mechanism. But why? Why does this system even exist? What are the underlying psychological drivers that lock both people into this really damaging dance? I mean, what does each person get out of it? Well, this slide shows how two very different motivations can lock together just perfectly. On one side, the controller's goal is total accountability immunity. If they can successfully manage impressions and convince everybody they're just harmless and fragile, they gain absolute leverage. You can never hold them to a normal adult standard without looking like a complete monster. And on the other side, you have the target's vulnerability, a deep-seated fear of being the villain. This often comes from a tendency toward what some call altruistic self-sacrifice, where you place the emotional comfort of others so far above your own safety that you just abandon your own needs. You end up valuing being a kind person way more than being a safe person, and it's right in that gap that this dynamic lives and breathes.
So, when you're faced with such a deeply ingrained psychological system, how in the world do you start to find clarity? Well, the path forward isn't about confrontation, it's actually about awareness. It has to begin inside you. So let's look at some practical, non-judgmental tools to simply see the system for what it is.
And that brings us to the most important question of this entire explainer. How do you interrupt this cycle? How do you reclaim your mental and emotional sovereignty when your own empathy has been turned into a weapon against you? The answer, it turns out, doesn't begin with fighting. It begins with a simple, private audit.
This is the impact versus intent audit. It is a simple, powerful, and totally descriptive mental tool. You're not judging their soul here, you are just observing the facts. In your own mind, you quietly separate their stated intent from the actual impact of their behavior. So they say, "I forgot." The observable impact is, your boundary was violated. They say, "I didn't mean to." The impact is, you were harmed. They say, "You're attacking me." The impact is, the conversation was deflected away from their actions. See, this isn't for arguing with them, it's for your own clarity. It helps you distinguish between the story you're being told and the reality you're actually experiencing. Practicing that audit helps you develop what we can call neutral accountability awareness. This basically means intentionally staying calm and gently but firmly returning to the baseline facts of what happened. It means refusing to get pulled into the emotional drama, refusing to engage with performative tears. Now, this is not about being cold or heartless. It's about reclaiming your right to be clear. It's about giving yourself permission to recognize that you are allowed to be clear even if they are crying. And that simple act interrupts that cycle of guilt before the whole cognitive inversion can even take hold.
And this all brings us to the core lesson, the fundamental principle that lets you dismantle this entire architecture from the inside out, starting with your own perception.
Believe the impact, not the stated intent. What Strategic Innocence really teaches us is that the most dangerous cages aren't made of steel bars, but of perceived fragility. It reveals that genuine kindness requires honesty and mutual responsibility, not just a performance of helplessness. The whole cycle is interrupted the moment you realize that you do not have to accept the role of the bad guy just for having a boundary. Your mind is your own territory, and awareness is the key to making sure someone else's confusion never again becomes a cage for your own autonomy.
Tears are not a counterargument to facts.